far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees. Good day, everyone. I'm Donna Jones Simmons, co-author, co-founder, and the architect of the 100 ABC Women project, as well as the executive producer of our fireside chats. Special thanks to our incredible technical support team, our moderator and panelists, who are the drivers behind our weekly inspirational conversations. Let me now turn you over to our moderator, who will introduce herself to you, as well as today's topic. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Happy spring and happy International Women's Month. Thank you for joining us today for the panel discussion titled Challenges for Successful Diversification of the Canadian Workforce. In particular, the panelists will respond to the question, what does it take for Black women to achieve and sustain leadership positions in large corporations. My name is Nancy Sims, and I'm the moderator for the session today. Welcome, family, and thank you for taking the time to sit in community. It is always good to have Sunday dinner with the 100 ABC Women and our networks. These fireside chats are definitely food for my spirit and soul. I trust they also feed you. As the panel moderator, I will be guiding us through the next 1.5 hours. The time will go swiftly. Let me share the path forward. I'll provide an introduction for each panelist and brief opening remarks on the topic. This will be followed by my posing a question to each of the panelists. At the end of the first round of questions, I will open the floor for the panelists to address questions and comments with each other and the audience. We ask that you place your questions in the chat. I will then turn to the second round of questions to each panelist, ensued by a period of questions and answers from the audience. Finally, I will deliver quick closing remarks. I hope that sounds good to you. Great, let's get started. I want to start by sharing some words from Audre Lorde. And she says, one of the most basic Black survival skills is the ability to change, to metabolize experience, good or ill, into something that is useful, lasting, effective. 400 years of survival as an endangered species has taught most of us that if we intend to live, we had better become fast learners. I think this quote aptly captures the essence of the four brilliant and amazing panelists today. Sometimes my math throws me off. I think that's why I'm in education. So it will be three amazing, brilliant panelists. Do join me in welcoming Tionda Kerr, Maxine Schroeder, Caroline Cole Power. Let me now share their bios very quickly. Maxine Schroeder is a 32-year experienced CIBC professional. She is currently the Director of Shared Services and the Enterprise Security Team at CIBC. In Maxine's 32-year career, she has worked in a variety of roles in finance, training and development, technology business management, and the CIBC Square program. Maxine is passionate about the practice of diversity and inclusion in corporate Canada and is looking forward to share her insights with us today. The next panelist is Tionda Kerr. While completing her psychology degree at the University of Windsor, Tionda started her career in gaming in 1994 with Casino Windsor. She began working for OLG in 1999 and has held management positions at Mohawk and Woodbine racetracks. She's currently the Director, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion within People and Culture. Tionda is married, is a married mother of two and resides in Brampton, Ontario. Our third panelist is Caroline Cole Power. Dr. Power is a human resources executive, an entrepreneur, and the CEO of Canadian HR Solutions, Inc. She was added to the list of Canada's most powerful women top 100 by WXN. And in recognition of International Women's Day, Dr. Powell was named an RBC hero by Royal Bank of Canada, an award bestowed on 4 women entrepreneurs from across Canada. Please join me in welcoming these most impressive women. Should I say that the topic today is timely? You would likely think, where the heck have you been, Nancy? And so, as I prepared to share a few words on the subject, I thought, what would I like to know if this was not a topic that I thought about constantly, experienced, and needed to make sense of for myself? I share a few thoughts with you. What I've come to know is that any conversation about Black employees in Canada must be grounded in an understanding of colonization, the enslavement of Black people in Canada, anti-Black racism, and intersectionality. You have noticed that even today on the panel, as people who identify as Black women, we're not homogenous. And we come to the table today. We come to commune with you today with our multiple identities, age, sexuality, disability, class, ethnicity, and other identities interlocked and woven into our race and gender. As Black identified women coming to the table to talk about barriers to leadership in corporate Canada, we must take into account how we are impacted by systemic racism and one of its manifestations, the concrete ceiling that prevents us from moving into senior leadership positions. Additionally, we must recognize and address the refusal to hire Black trans women who hold the credential and experience to do the work. I would be remiss not to share with you that this topic of leadership is fraught with controversies. The definition of who is a leader, who decides who is a leader, and so on is complex and layered. It is even more challenging when we center Black women. According to Snaggs Wilson, 2021, in her dissertation, a Black woman who worked in corporate Canada, current leadership theories do not capture the resiliency, the culture of resistance, commitment, strength, and determination of Black female leaders. So while today we're focusing on leadership positions in corporate Canada, I wish to acknowledge the many Black women who were leaders here in Canada and abroad, our mothers, sisters, daughters, friends, and aunties, who do not hold a title, but who most often keep the lights on. I want these women to know that I see you and I thank you. Well, I can tell we're all excited about this topic, and I'm hopeful. I must be hopeful that soon Black women, many more of us, will sit at the table of decisions if this is what we want. You will not be disappointed. There's no better place to spend your Sunday afternoon. Please sit with us a while, grab your beverage of choice, and take heed. My first question is to Carolyn. What needs to happen in large corporations for Black women to reach the highest executive levels and excel in sustained ways? Over to you, Carolyn.
Nancy, thank you for the question. And I want to say to everyone, it's a real pleasure to be here. And I want to just do a call out for International Women's Month. It's a special time. In my mind, it's International Women's Month and International Women's Day every day of the year. But since there's a month for it, let's please join me in celebrating. So I want to start my comments by looking at the macro perspective of what needs to happen. What needs to happen to enable people like me to succeed in a sustained way needs to happen actually at the very top of the organization. The organization, I'm doing a singular, but you can pluralize that as well. So organizations across the board. So what am I alluding to? I am alluding to that the changes, the first set of changes need to happen at the board level. And so it means that there needs to be a greater representation of Blacks in general, and perhaps Black women at the board level. And while we're looking at the board, specifically at the board executive level. So there's a board of directors, and then there are the officers of the organization. I am saying at that level. So opening the door where we're in those boardrooms, and then while we're in those boardrooms, we're thriving enough that we can make it to the board executive seat. Why do I start with the board level? I start with the board level because understanding that the board governs, the board does not operate. In general, that's how boards work. The board is the mechanism in any organization that sets the CEO's performance metrics. That's the only employee whose performance metric the board sets. But in setting the CEO's performance metrics and making Black diversity, specifically Black diversity, perhaps other kinds too, of course, but specifically Black diversity a priority, it means that that is going to have to cascade to the next layer. And if the next layer, which are the CEO's direct reports, if they're being held accountable and if they're doing their jobs well, then that must cascade throughout the organization. And so anything that we're doing that excludes getting the board involved and getting the CEO being held accountable, in my mind, I think it's smoke and mirrors. I think the word for it is performative, perhaps. And in some organizations, it's more performative than in other organizations. So I think that's one thing. Of course, as I make my comments, I want everyone to be aware there is no one thing that's a panacea that fixes it all. But I'm saying if we're going to look at it holistically, it's got to start at the top and start at the top where people can make a difference, which is the board and the board executive. The second thing, and now this takes us further into the organization, which you might gather that's where my next set of comments would have to be. So from an operating perspective, not a governing perspective now, then you're looking at within. The next specific thing, among others, but I think a key thing is that there needs to be sponsorship for people who look like us. So there is, from what I see, my own experience and so forth, there's lots of mentorship, and mentorship is important, of course, absolutely. We do need people to guide us. We do need people to turn the lights on in the room, to help us, to tell us what they did and how it worked for them. That's great. But it really matters when we can have someone in the room when we are not in the room speaking on our behalf. And that is the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And so that mentor is that person who, when the critical decisions about who's going to be advanced or who's going to be given the opportunity for the next development assignment, when those decisions are being made, we need someone in the room who's able to say, this is a person that we want to think about. Or if other people are being put on slates, someone in the room to say, what about? Or thirdly, how are we saying no to this person when we just said yes to that person? Someone asking the questions. And so what I'm speaking of is the fact that in many large organizations, there's a talent review process, uppercase T, uppercase R, talent review. And a lot of the big blues, there's a talent review process that happens. at very senior levels. And unless we're there, we're excluded. I'm going to suggest to everyone the name of a person whose videos you can watch. Her name is Carla Harris. Carla with a C, Harris, as 2 R's, H, uppercase H, Carla Harris. Carla is a Black woman from the United States. She was with Morgan Stanley Investment Bank for about 40 years, made her way all the way to vice chairman of the bank. So very, very senior person. Carla has a series of YouTube videos describing what happens in talent review. So as I wrap up my remarks for the first question, I just want you to hear that it's got to start at the top in the board, at the board executive level. And then when we go into the organization, getting sponsors and access to sponsors so that we can cultivate the relationships with the people who can speak on our behalf and really make things happen. Over to you, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you so very much. I'm going to move to the next person, which will be Tionda. Tionda, what are some of the barriers to the racial diversification of the workforce?
I love that this question comes so right after Caroline's, because it'll carry through. And so like Caroline as well, thank you so much for the opportunity, 100 ABC. I'm sitting on the territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and I'm honored to work on these lands. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Just like to get that in real quickly, but just to carry off of what Caroline had said, is that we have to understand that these corporate systems, they were built for white men by white men. And so it's not set up for our success to begin with. So I would say the first thing is just that these systems were built that way. And so we have to dismantle them. And I think Caroline is right. Like it has to start at the top, and you've got to do this, like in terms of when you talk about sponsorship, you've got to do it on purpose. And so sponsorship is one of the ways to do it on purpose. And I think we need to recognize immediately that, you know, for Black women, it is 10, 20 times harder to get into those C-suite positions, those board positions, without the intentionality of getting us there. And so I think that's number one. And I think the number two barrier that I want to address is fear. And I want to address this concept of the imposter syndrome that is making waves, but was coined in like 1978 by Pauline Clance and Dr. Susan Imes in 78, when they had that book, The Imposter Phenomenon, about high achieving women. And I think, to me, I actually think, in all honesty, imposter syndrome is because of our systems built by white men for white men. It comes from the inherent bias that we can't accomplish certain things. And as women, I think one of the barriers we have to get over is that, you know, we're not imposters, and that it's just absurdity, and that we can do anything. And I think these constant years of microaggressions and unconscious bias telling us we can't is keeping us from also using our voices and challenging the systems so that we can get to those levels of leadership that we are more than not only deserving of, but can do and possibly do much better. And so I think that when we definitely need to break down these systems, Nancy. I think that everybody would agree that we have to look at it from different ways. We've got to unpack our mindset the way we've all been. Like, I mean, I have to be very honest in saying that, you know, I'm privileged in my system. My system is a racist system, but I've been able to get ahead in that system, and that privilege and power, I need to reach back and help others get to where they need to. And in service of others is where we're going to continue to get success. But I do think those two takeaways is what I'd like to note, is that the reality is that we are working and trying to work within systems that are built by white men for white men, and that we need to dismantle and get over the fears of that imposter syndrome of who we are and where we need to go. And I'll leave it there. Nancy.
Thank you so much, Tionda. Thank you. A friend of I'm happy to hear you refer to the fact that you lift as you climb. And I think that is very important and one of the ways that we can move forward. The next question is to Maxine. What do you perceive as the biggest challenge for Black women to enter and flourish in the Canadian workforce?
Thanks, Nancy, for that question. And I really want to express my appreciation for being part of the panel and having an opportunity to speak on this topic today. And of course, happy International Women's Month to everyone. I think women are the hardest working people on this planet, and it's great that we have a month where we're actually getting recognized. So what do I perceive as the biggest challenges for Black women to flourish in the Canadian workforce? I've been in the workforce for a very, very long time. As you can see from my bio, I won't tell you how many years again, but I've been fortunate enough to see the pendulum swing. I was part of the pendulum many, many years ago when I was hired in '91, when there was a resurgence of wanting to hire Black people. And I'm not saying that I wasn't qualified, but I actually was part of like, we've got to get more Black people in the organization. There's not enough of them around the table. So I was part of that renaissance. We've recently, over the last few years, with the death of George Floyd, seen again where companies are having a resurgence of wanting to launch or relaunch diversification for Black people in their organizations. Within CIBC, it looked like there's a lot of listening exercises with executives where Black people were expected to come and share their feelings, provide their insights. I went to many of them, all in aid to see how can we fix this? How can we appear to be non-racist? So it worked. It caused the organization to figure out, okay, maybe now we should actually start to do something more progressive. So every time the pendulum swings, the diversity initiatives become more and more progressive, which is a good thing. I myself was promoted last year to director, my first director position, based on that pendulum swinging. I was qualified, but I waited a lot of years in a senior manager role to get into that director position, more so than probably my white counterpart would have waited. We also, during that resurgence, got our first Black woman VP at CIBC, where many other organizations had already had Black VPs or Black women VPs. So the issue of diversification is not that it's not necessarily happening. We are getting hired, but what I think is in the last few years, there's been a phenomenon that's called the glass cliff. You may have heard of this. It's actually the opposite of glass ceiling or the concrete ceiling. It was featured on CNN in December of 2022 by Nicole Terry Ellis. And it's the phenomenon where Black women are promoted into leadership positions and given large, many, many responsibilities, where the standards are often higher than their non-Black predecessors and not reasonable. We're expected to work hard to fix these issues. A lot of times we're so grateful for being given the opportunity that it's our dream job. We really wanted to get this role. We're excited. It's our first, foray into that upper middle management, and we're very excited. However, you really have to take a step back sometimes. It's not always as good as it seems. We're asked to take a role sometimes in a crisis situations, either due to outward or inward pressures, and it's not necessarily sustainable. You're provided with limited onboarding or guidelines or how to stay away from sharp objects so that you stay out of trouble. You're expected to fix unruly teams that are not necessarily accountable and don't want to be accountable to a Black woman manager. You're expected to strike a balance between delivering good or delivering a lot in short timelines. You've been hired, as I said, through some diversification initiative, even though you're qualified, but we're held, as I said, to a different standard. In short, I believe that this is the biggest challenge. It's not that we can't get hired into leadership roles because we are qualified. However, it's difficult to sustain the leadership role. There's a report published in Lean In by Rachel Thomas. It says that Black women face greater barriers to advancement in the workplace than other races due to microaggressions, questioning of their abilities, and judgment. I believe, to close, is that corporations have a responsibility to understand the uniqueness of how Black women show up at work and start really listening to that. They need to provide dedicated professional development, mentorship, and hiring that is unique for Black women. And they need to provide the resources to do our job, allow us to be empowered, to be able to manage our own staff, hire who we need to do to get the job done, similar to what they would do to their non-Black counterpart. So that in closing, I say that the organization still has still have a lot of work to do in terms of making sure that Black women are successful in their organization. It doesn't stop with just hiring us into a role and saying, okay, we've done our part in terms of diversification. That's my point.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. So we have a few minutes that we can, I'd like to open up to the other three panelists to see whether you have questions, further comments on each other's responses at this time. Thank you. Please speak directly to the panelists.
So I want to hear a little bit more, Caroline, if you don't mind, on that, because I like I had said in my note, is that I truly believe that our systems weren't made for us. And then you mentioned too that we have to start at the top, which you really do, right? It needs to come from leadership. Totally. But if the systems were meant for that, how are we getting through? Like, how can we get through even more? I was fortunate to be directly reporting into my CEO. And so at my current role, he was extremely influential on hearing voices of people of color and making change and impact slowly but surely. But how else can we get to leadership?
So, thank you for the question, Tionda. Thank you for the phonetics. That helps. So again, I say that whether it's yours or somebody else's CEO, if you're operating from inside, you are really only at the mercy of that person, the goodness of that person's heart, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, what we're talking about is encouraging or influencing or perhaps even asking people to give up power or share power. That's what we're talking about. And if you take the race piece out of it and you look at human beings, people, one person to another person or one group to another group, most people want to hold on to power. Most people are, especially if it's been entrenched for years and the power has been a source of reward. It has been. So if in your case you had someone who was benevolent, it sounds as though, and was able to make some things happen for you. But more effective is if the person is being held accountable by the people that they report to. And so it has to come from the top. So a direct answer to your question is, we need pathways besides what happens inside the company, these companies. We need pathways to the board suite. And then once people are on the board suite, are in the board suite, how do we get them to board executives? And so I am saying, as much as this discussion will be a part of it, but as much as we do what we can when we're inside, the real movement, the real needle that matters is what's happening above. And that is why when you look around corporate Canada, yes, in many organizations, you see representation, you see people who've done well, like the two of you and others, and myself in that when I was in corporate. But when you go to the very, very pinnacle of these organizations and you look at the boardroom, in most cases, it's still pretty lily white. And diversity is women. Just a little joke I wanted to give to you. So I was speaking with, I won't give you context because it'll be too pointed. I was speaking with someone, and we were talking about diversity. And she said to me, well, around our board table, some people are vegan. So we have diversity. Some people, that was a first vegan. That's different. So we shouldn't laugh though, but for some people, they just don't get it. And so I'm saying at that level, the change needs to happen. The boardrooms are still pretty white. You open the globe, you see the appointment notices, and we're still missing largely from the appointment notices, although inside there are lots of us in middle management.
Yeah, I agree. We got to start driving it from the board 100%.
And I think a lot of our diversity experts that are in the marketplace are very much, and they're doing good work, not an issue. But a lot of the work is targeted at what's going on within. We need to do that, but I say the bigger needle is what's going on above.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah.
We need to infiltrate.
We need to tell some of us that, hey, consider board seats. You throw your hat in the ring, get yourself ready for that as much as you're getting yourself ready for your corporate careers. You're not necessarily going to have the experience to sit on a board right away, but have that be a part of what you're looking to do.
Yeah, 100%.
That's where the change happens. Yeah. I just wanted to Maxine, so I have a question, a comment on what you said. And so you talk about the glass cliff, absolutely. Glass cliff people are put into positions and they're under-resourced. And the piece I want to add is this. And then the system looks at the person who's failed and says, see,
I know.
this is what happened when we
know.
Right? And so it not only is it horrible for the person experiencing it, it actually puts us as a group back even further because there's more risk associated with promoting and advancing, because look at what happened the last 3 we brought in.
Absolutely. It just perpetrates for them. See,
totally.
The Black person.
See, we tried.
We're not racist. We tried, and here we are.
Look at what we got. This is what happens when you do it.
She didn't make it.
Yeah.
But Dr. Parr, I do want to, comment on what you're saying. I mean, with CIBC, and I'm throwing their name out there, but it is, I've been there for a long time, so I've seen a lot of what goes on. So, they have done the diversification at the board through women.
Yes.
They've got also a Black woman on the board, based out of, I think she's based out of the US. And, we've got, bias training, and we have quotas, and we have, the Black North Initiative that Victor Dodik's a
That's
part
right.
of.
Yeah.
On and on it goes, right? So I still think that the sustainment issue is a problem.
It still is
what I'm talking about. I still believe that even though it's at the board, we've got the training, there still is there, and maybe they need to be held more accountable. So how many Black people are you hiring, and how many Black people are you keeping? Because ultimately what happens without the sustainment and the support is that you get disengaged, demotivated, you either move on to another role, or they decide that, you're not towing the line, ask you to leave, or you're terminated, or what. I'm not saying there aren't women that have been successful, like yourself and Tiana. I mean, even myself, I'm still there. But the tax that we have to go through in order to make sure that we are there, and the amount of support that we have to find outside of our organization or our team is very much a tax on us. Very much a
Maxine,
tax.
and you're absolutely right. Now, the comment I want to make is a question for everybody who's in the panel and everybody else who's listening. Ask yourself the question: when we look at the boards of the big blues, the biggest and bluest, do we have any Black women or Blacks at the board executive level? That's the question. I think the answer is a 0.
0.
I think not the board level, the board
Yeah.
executive level. I think the answer is a 0. There may be one that I missed. I don't know. But I'm just saying.
I believe CIBC does have one Black board executive on.
Board executive, meaning the people who lead the board. Yeah.
Okay.
Board executive level, not the board. The board executive.
Okay.
But anyway, I think I made the point.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the board, because they set the board sets the CEO's objectives, but it's the board executive that the CEO reports to.
Okay. Okay.
Anyway, I think I've made the point.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
We
for
have
that.
some
Makes a
questions from the
difference.
audience. We have some questions from the audience. And the first one is, how does one deal with barriers to climbing that ladder despite support from above? And I believe this is directed to you, Dr. Cole.
Can you please
Dr.
repeat the
Cole
question?
Power. How does one deal with barriers to climbing that ladder despite support from above? So despite the sponsorship, despite the mentorship, what if that falls through? What if that doesn't exist?
Yeah. Well, my thinking is if you have support from above and you're sponsored, it should be easier. Nothing is easy, but it should be easier. What comes to mind, though, is thinking about relationships with peers, because yes, we need people from above helping to pave the way, but we also need to have our peers feeling that this is someone who is great to work with. This is someone who we want to throw a weight behind, because sometimes our peers can coalesce and come together, and you're doing well, but someone has to, just all it takes is 1 or 2 people to plant a seed of doubt. And I think we all know, most of us know, there's contagion in negativity. There's contagion. There's more contagion in negativity than there is in positivity. So there's, someone who says to say, well, have you noticed this? And before you know it, that becomes the thing. And the peers can tarnish what was working for you. And importantly, that loop can sometimes transcend and get back to people who are trying to sponsor you. Right. And so that's the only thing I would say, because if you have the sponsorship in place and you're being supported, that's more than most of us, have. And so then we want to look at the peer relationships. I want to go back to something I said at the start, everybody. Remember, what we're talking about is asking people to share power. Yeah. None of this is going to be easy, right? It's going to be a tug of war, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions for anyone on the panel. How does a sponsor differ from a mentor?
Oh, I'll take that one, Nancy, because I like this one. And the reason why I like this one is because a sponsor does it on purpose. A sponsor does it with intentionality. Mentoring, although just as successful to get you whatever skills and to help you close the gaps in your career, 100%. But the sponsor intentionally puts you forward and throws themselves behind your value and says, Tianda is going to be excellent in this position. Give it to her. Here's what she will do for you and add value. And they break down those barriers of perhaps not knowing. And a sponsor, white men have been sponsored for years. It exists. So it's nothing new.
Absolutely.
And so now you need to do it on purpose for your Black women. And you do that by getting to know them. I'm lovely people. I'm very lovely. Get to know me. You'll want to sponsor me. Like, that's just what it is, right? You know, I'm just saying, like, you have to get down and get uncomfortable and get to know people. But yeah, that is, I always say it very plain and simple. That's the difference. Sponsorship, do it on purpose with intention.
Thank you for that, Tianda. I also have found over the years that I've had to educate my sponsors because they don't know how to sponsor a Black woman.
Correct.
Okay, so we might have to teach them how.
Yeah.
Another question is, why are sponsors critical for career advancement? And I know we have addressed that to some extent, but I wonder, what is it that if I want career advancement, how do I work with my sponsor to get that on the board, to get that visible?
Well, can I?
Sure, Mixing, go
Yeah,
ahead, please.
I just want to tack on to Tianda's words. So in my years with CIBC, I've had a lot of mentors, because you're told, you know, you need a mentor, you should get a mentor. So for me, mentor is the one that helps me navigate the corporate world, helps me kind of stay out of the, you know, the dangers, the waters, and how to showcase myself and profile myself and things like that. Whereas I find the sponsors, the ones that have been sponsors for me, and as you said, Dr. Powers, there's the one that speaks about me when I'm not in the room, right? That if I'm going for a role that I have applied for, they're the ones that somebody can call and say, you know, Maxine's like, you know, exceeded expectations and she's great and that's my sponsor, right? And that's the difference. And they'll throw themselves in front of, you know, oncoming traffic for me. Basically, they'll make sure that I'm protected if things are going sideways in the organization. I've had sponsors do that for me, where, you know, I'm sort of like, don't trouble Maxine, she's fine, just leave her alone.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So it gives you room to breathe and it gives you room to progress.
Completely.
Yeah.
If I can piggyback on Maxine's point.
Absolutely.
So all of what Maxine said, absolutely. I would add also that a sponsor is someone who has invested some of their success in trying to bring you along. And so if that person, in many cases, and I'm again referring to that talent review process, because there's a lot of times talent sponsors are in the room. And sponsors sometimes will use their own P&L. You know, let's say you have, after the talent review process, 5 names have surfaced. These are people we want to invest in. And they're all 5 excellent. Well, clearly that's why they would have made the top 5% or top 10%, depending on what your organization uses as a metric. And the question is, based on budget, based on other resources, we are going to only go with 3. Which of the 5 do we choose? A sponsor will say, in adding their 2 cents worth, this person needs to be one of the 3, and here's why. And by the way, I have a project that we're starting up, and she can stay on the bank's P&L, but she can come here and you can do some transfers. My point is, they will financially, they will put the money behind it. A lot of times, the money part that I'm talking about, the employee doesn't realize that happens. But the sponsors will bankroll it. The employees still get the regular paycheck. They don't know the difference. But for those 6 months or 8 months, someone might bankroll it. So that's what a sponsor is. You're willing to take that, I guess, risk, if you call it, and say, hey, I'm gonna.
They're investing in your future.
Absolutely. And a sponsor, when you look at the top of the organizations, the biggest and bluest, yes, people are good. Yes, there's talent. But almost I'm being conservative, probably everybody that you see there's been a sponsor involved somewhere.
Yep.
Because people are good, but you need, beyond, when you've got the 5 and you only have to choose 3, you need somebody to say, here's who.
Yep.
The sponsorship is critical.
Thank you for that. I wonder if there are any other questions you'd like to answer at this time. If not, we're going to move into the second round of questions.
I think someone's asked, how do you get a sponsor? I do want to address that, because I think that was one of the ones that I So sponsors choose people. People don't choose sponsors. Yeah. So so yes, you can go up to a sponsor and say, "Can you sponsor?" It's kind of in poor form. They are typically someone who is, as you know, senior enough and typically with a significant P&L, and they look around to see the talent. That's why they often plant themselves in the talent review discussions. And they will notice the talent that's coming up or the talent that's already there, and they will reach out to me. So sponsors actually choose. The question isn't the question is, how do you make yourself visible to a sponsor, and how do you attract the sponsor? That's the question.
Yep.
And so it means you're doing good work at work, great work at work. Take it away from under that bushel and have people see what you're doing without being arrogant, without being obnoxious, without being any of those things. But you need to find some way to showcase what you're doing in a positive, respectful way. So sponsors can find you. There's a boat cruise in the summertime. Find yourself there with the company. Find yourself at the cocktail parties. Find yourself. Do things. In other words, not to sit in your work, do your work. That too, you need to get out there. That's how you attract the sponsor. They first have to know that you exist.
Thank you for that, Dr. Power. I guess some of the work that equity practitioners would do is to trouble that notion so that we educate sponsors to understand that people enter at different levels, and some may not want to go to that boat cruise, but that doesn't mean that person is the strongest person among the group of people to be promoted. So that's some of the education that I do believe has to happen with a sponsor. Because as somebody says, what if you're not a social?
I saw the social butterfly. The thing about it is, it's a great question. And it's one that makes me chuckle because it's true. Or what if here's a practical one. What if you can't make the boat cruise because you have to go to pick up your children from daycare because it's after work, right? Or maybe religious reasons. And so this is why the point isn't so much the boat cruise. The point is that we need to find ways to get visible in some way. That's the point.
Personal brand.
Right? Yeah. And promoting it. Yeah.
Correct.
And
I'm
so
just going to add to that. So I'm essentially an introverted person. And as I started to, my career, and I realized I need to get out there, I used resources. I did how many years of Toastmasters where I learned to speak on, off the fly, table topics, do speeches, public speak, just so I could get over that wallflower or imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it, so that you can have, the courage and the confidence to get out there. It's not easy, especially if you're an introverted person, but it is something that, unfortunately, hard work again is not enough in this day and age. So you have to get out there, you have to showcase your talents, showcase your projects, what you've accomplished for the organization. And that's how you garner sponsorship. When you launch a project, just don't keep it, a secret. Like, you got to get out there and tell people, hey, this is what I've done. Kind of like a bit of a brag that we have to get used to doing, right?
We as a people are naturally humble. And so it's
exactly
to do it. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, there was, just to the points that are being made, there was a time, something shifted. There was a time in our work milieu where if you just sit down and did your work hard, they would come find you. There was a time where that was the narrative. And I'm just saying that's shifted. I think that's shifted, where you still need to do the work, but you also need to kind of, get some attention over this side here. However that might look for you, if you're, wallflower, introverted, or whatever that might look like. Yeah.
So there is one more question before we move on. Can you address the issue of tokenization and ambushing, where a qualified Black person is hired and not given the support at critical times? How do we get leaders to understand how this happens and how to avoid it?
That is such a big question.
That's a few questions in one, I say.
Exactly, right?
And we've probably all lived it.
Yeah.
underwear, Jake former.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'll let the ladies. Yeah, that's a tough. I'll start because it's a little bit fresh. It's a little bit fresh for me because I have been hired into a team, and then all of a sudden we started to encounter, you know, financial pressures from the organization. So you're limited with resources and support, et cetera, et cetera. But you're still expected to deliver at, you know, at a high level all the time. So for me, it's about getting creative, right? So it's about finding the efficiencies, finding a way I could do things or my team can do things quicker, better, faster. It's about finding resources like co-op students to come in and do the work at, you know, value added. So I just find a way to get creative. I still keep asking, I still keep going to the trough and saying, can I get, you know, full-time people? Can I get, you know, consultant? Can I get, I still keep asking, but I had to get creative because otherwise I can't deliver. And no matter what I'm saying, they're saying, well, you have enough people, you have enough people. So I got to find a way to get creative. So that's how I manage it, as well as just keep putting my hand up for resources.
I think too, I'm gonna address the emotional side of it too, in that I think our leaders, we can't expect them to know everything because they don't. Obviously, society is today, and so I think that a lot of it is like I've gotten to a point. So I'm saying this from, again, another privileged place. I've been at OLG for 23 years. People know me for years, so it was easier for me to tell people the difference between you know, tokenism and actually hiring a very qualified and respectful person of color to do their job. And I think that what I was able to do very well is address that emotion, that uncomfortableness. We had like forceful conversations on anti-racism, anti-Black racism, and what it means. And so, you know, we addressed it earlier. You don't want to set people up for failure. You don't want to just put that Black person in that job because you want to tick the box. It's about addressing our entire culture as a whole and developing that trust so that you know who your people are. We're in this we talk about HR a lot, and we're in this very people-centric place. People value social purpose and who is working within an organization. They like to see the diversity. They want to see diversity throughout the different levels. And I think that to get rid of tokenism as a whole is just like, we're going at this intentionally and purposefully. And so you need to know that you're not just ticking a box by putting this person in this job. You're getting the most qualified person who happens to be a person of color, right? And so I'll just, the emotional side of it is like, just like, we need to address it. Call the behavior out, call the person in, address it. Tokenism is wrong. Develop your people to do the right thing. Sorry, I could go on forever. I'll stop there because I know Dr. Colpower, you must.
No, actually, I think all that I would need to say has been said. So I'll stay out of this one because you've said it. You've said it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to round two.
There's more?
The first question is directed to Tionda. Do you think corporate Canada wants to diversify?
I do. I think in the heart, people know that it's the right thing. And, you know, frankly, by 2030 in Toronto alone, you know, people of color are that's the majority. It's just what it is. So I think people know there's work to be done, but to the points we were making earlier, people are a little scared to share the power wealth, right? And I think that that's where our problem is. And so people are a little hesitant to give up what they need to. Yes. Right? And I honestly think that's where it is. So I do believe that, yes, people know that it's the right thing to do. It's the way the world is going. It's what we need to do to be competitive, to be global powerhouses is what we need to do. I just don't think it's going as fast as me personally would like to go. Like Maxine, I sat in that middle management role forever. You know, and I give hats off. I sent an email to Donna recently. I give hats off to the top 100 accomplished Black women honorees, because it gave me a platform for people to see me differently. And then my world sort of opened up. And so I think we need to help each other in that sense. But I wish it would move a lot faster. I wish I would have been a director 10 years ago when my other colleagues who started with me were getting director roles. And so I wish it would go a lot faster. But I do 100% believe that we want to get there. We just, people don't like conflict and they don't like the uncomfortable. And frankly, people have this fear. Human beings have a natural tendency to fear, and they don't want to give up what they already have. But I always tell people, it's not a piece of pie, it's not pizza. You're not going to run out. There's room for us all. We need to develop each other all. It's not a zero-sum thing either. When you have everybody contributing, it helps us all, not just the Black, people, or the people, the 2S LGBTQI people, where we all succeed and get better when we all do it together and share that wealth. So I'll stop there, Nancy, because I don't want to go on, and I can go on and on, but I won't.
Thank you, Tionda. Thank you for that. The next question goes to Dr. Power. You're being recruited to drive significant change across the enterprise. What are the true risks that may be associated with this kind of career opportunity, which on the surface often looks like a dream job? And I think we have touched on this a bit earlier, but maybe more directly.
No, coming from a different angle, actually. Yeah, but yeah. So yeah, certainly one of the things can be that you're under-resourced. But how this question is different is that this question is about driving change, specifically driving change. So yes, you've been, they might have met you through the recruitment process, and maybe the position they were looking at you initially, they gave somebody else maybe, but then they come to you and they say, oh, but we've got this big change, this big piece of work that needs to be done, and we're going to bring you in to do this. Here's what a person needs to be sure of before you take that job. You want to be sure that they're not looking to have an external face become the face of the change, come in, do the thing, come in, institute the issues and institute the policies or practices, and take the fall. Why do I say take the fall? It doesn't mean that all change is going to lead to a fall. We know that human beings generally prefer status quo. Nature, in fact, nature prefers stability. So people in organizations are going to either go with the change. There's going to be some people who want to go jump on board, yeah, like the new state. There are going to be some people who will watch the change happen, but just don't get involved. And there are going to be people who resist the change. The point is, the face that's on the change is the face that is going to be associated with disrupting what we had going before. And no matter what we had going before in your organization, there will be some people who say, we don't like what you're doing. So some organizations go out, get a face to come in to push this through, and then exit the face. When the face is gone, well, who's left says, well, yes, we do want this new state, but that person was the bearer of the bad news. So this is, I'm not sure people followed the point, right? No. And so it isn't to say that every time there's a change initiative, that's the case. It's not at all, but sometimes it is the case. And sometimes it's people who are marginalized, many times who are invited into these opportunities. They look like a great opportunity. And on two fronts, we jump on it because we think, oh, look, that looks good. But then it blows up, and the person is exited, and the existing people somehow still have their face intact. So here's what we want to ask. So when you have this kind of opportunity, you want to find out who of the existing leadership team will also be the second face right beside yours on the change. Understand if there will be someone who will still own a part of that in the event that you're exited. If there isn't anyone that they can point to, that change is likely to be riskier than it looks. Because there's some kinds of change, no matter how you come at it, there are going to be people inside who have a problem with it. And the leadership can usually assess that early enough. And if they see that this is one where we need a robot, we need to bring in a robot, line them up and send them to go do it. You don't want to be that person who they brought in, put the Energizer Bunny robot batteries in, and send you in. So I hope people have understood that. It's a dynamic. I've seen so much happen over the years, so much. And sometimes at the end, when you do a postmortem and you look, you realize that thing was so problematic that nobody inside wanted to put their face on it. They brought in a robot, they wound them up like the Energizer Bunny, and they said, go do it. The poor person comes in, they didn't last, it didn't, but the changes, the leadership picks up and they pick up and they say, yes, we're going to go forward, but their faces are not on it. We're the good guys. See, we got rid of that person. That person was a troublemaker. We're going to say we got rid of them. And it's all done. Very interesting.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that.
Has anybody here seen that kind of thing where someone comes in, there's a face on it, and then the person's going, yes. It's the kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing where you can only see it in the postmortem when you look back and you realize, that's what that was. They brought in a robot. Yeah. Don't be the robot.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
True.
And, you know, the emotional injury to those people
Careers.
is massive.
Yes.
I just recently saw something very similar occurring, and my heart just hurt for the person. And it's that level of naivety, I think, and not having these types of open, honest conversations so we can all elevate each other, not to step into those areas.
Well, that's
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so much, Dr. Power.
It's true.
So the third question is for Maxine. There is much conversation about the importance of networking for career success. I know we touched on this earlier. What role do you think networking has in successful racial diversification of corporate Canada?
Nancy, thanks for the question. In my mind, as I said, as I progressed throughout the organization, I recognize that networking has a significant role in racial diversification. And as I said, some people like myself who are introverted have quite a challenge with it, you know, but over the years, I've learned to get better at it. But it starts with, the importance of it starts with you as an individual, as a Black person, getting out there and meeting hiring managers so that they can get to connect with you as a person, understand the similarities that you may share, whatever those are, and so that they can sort of lower their biases, so that they can start to look at you differently as a candidate, as somebody that they could hire, right? If you're not out there, if you're not putting yourself out there and doing that networking, people won't have the opportunity to see you and recognize you and see your value, see the value in bringing you into the organization. The next tier is the networking once you get hired. We all network sometimes just to get a role, to get a job, but then there's another tier, right? There's another tier in terms of now you have to network within your team, in your new role. You're new, nobody really knows you. You may know some people. Well, it's funny, like I know a lot of people because I've been with the organization a long time, but I still have to do some networking and just sort of get to know people, like who's who in the zoo, who could I count on, who would be supportive of me, who, right? So this is important when you need advocacy, when you need to get something pushed through, when you need resources. How can you depend on your peers or leadership? So it's really important. But the challenge for Black women sometimes is that we're so busy working hard, you know, because the twice as hard kind of mentality, the culture that we have been groomed into, that we don't put aside the time. You know, what's the rule of thumb? I don't know, 1 hour a week, 1 hour a month, 1 hour a day. I don't know. There's all kinds of rules of
Yeah.
thumbs out there about networking and how often you should do it and blah, blah, blah. But the problem is, as Black women, we find it challenging because we're heads down, we're working, we've got all these deliverables, we got to be good, we got to do a good job. So that's a challenge, is that, you know, realizing and recognizing that we really do need to put that time aside, and not only when we're looking for a new role, but ongoing, meeting with your coworkers, meeting with other people in the department, et cetera, outside of your regular work. And then you have to look at that as a way that you are going to create advocacy in the role. So we have to, as we still, you know, do our twice as hard, whatever it is, we do have to make time. There's also the barriers of the old boys network, where it's not easy to get into that domain and network with those individuals who are in that old boys network. I won't go down that whole really what that means, but I know that many of you do know what that means. But don't be afraid to try to step into it, right? Don't be afraid to try to make a connection with some of them. It's not an easy nut to crack, but it is important if you can at least, you know, be on the fringe or on the outskirts, and at least have people recognize you and know who you are and what you're capable of. So I'd recommend that you continue to work hard, you lift your head up out of your role and recognize who your allies are, who your support sponsors are, your mentors, and who you can learn from. Especially if there are people that look like you in the organization that are doing it, that are, you know, senior directors, VPs, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes harder to get their time, but try to connect with these individuals because they've already made paths for you. They've made a bit of a path for you. So you should be trying to connect with those individuals and making time to do that. So that would how I would say that the networking plays a part there.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. We're going to move right into Q&A from the audience. And I do have a question. Are there Black people who have been displaced due to the amount of money they earn? Please introduce me to that person. No,
Not me.
as the people who are earning, yeah.
Like you're making too much? You're making too much, so you're cost saving, so I'll.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't heard
Well,
of
it's a really good question, because essentially, because I've been in the organization a while, I probably am on the higher scale. I shouldn't say that, but people would say that, right? So there's two ways to look at it. They don't want to get rid of you because you're too expensive to get rid of, or they want to get rid of you because they could probably hire 3 people for the price of you. So there's two ways to look at it. But I find that it's more than likely they don't want to get rid of you. They really would like to keep you because of your experience and the fact that it just costs too much to get rid of you. Right. And especially if you're doing a good job, like, you know, what's the point? They just give you the work of 3 people.
Thank you.
That's my experience.
Thank you. Dr. Power, Tianda, do you have anything to add to that piece?
Well, I will say it's not a nice thing to do, whoever's ever done that. I don't understand why you would do that. You got talent in front of you. You know, it makes me think of equity, right? Like, that's one of the ways that you're helping with equity, to give people money. Like it's like we are way down here, especially Black women compared to white men. And so you do have to pay. You have to pay them for their work. We will never in my lifetime anyways, and it's a midlife. So like in my lifetime, like we're not going to get there. So I'm like, pay the people. That's what I would say. But I do not personally know of anybody who's been displaced because they've been.
I don't know of any either. And I think that if that really was a part of the reason, the person would never know it.
Yeah.
It would be very poor
Exactly.
form to actually say, that would be very poor form. I don't know, Nancy, if I can just add a piece that I think is worth for us to think about, is the fact that misogynoir, anti-black, anti-black hate, whatever you call it, racism hate, is interesting because at this time in our society, in our lives, it's the flavor of it is different. If we go back, and yes, I started my work when I was 2, so I've been here more than 30 years in my work. I know 30 years. But I remember there was a time, and I think Maxine, you talked about the early 90s. I was in the workplace at that time, and I remember that Toronto looked very different in terms of diversity. So there were different groups, but we didn't have the array of different cultural groups that we do now. It's a beautiful thing that we are as diverse as we are. And I talk about Toronto, but there's Montreal, Vancouver, the big cities. And so my point is that our situation today is that it's not just a case of how do we manage the issue. It's that when the senior executives are looking at who do we appoint, who do we hire, they still check the diversity box if they hire other people who are of color. And so a part of it is not to say we don't want other people. Other people, of course, they deserve to be here and so forth. But we have to understand that it isn't used to be like it used to be a black-white question. That's not the question. It's color. And so when we are positioning ourselves and when we are navigating, we have to understand that sometimes that South Asian person or that other person may be the person who gets the appointment or gets the advantage. And there's no prescription that I have for it. I'm just saying we have to factor that in. It's not just black-white. There are others too that are at the table that are looking for a part of the meal. I just think it's necessary for us to make sure that that's said and we understand that. And even when we're looking at allies and we're looking at building supports, it's not just the white question, because sometimes we need to link into other people who may be able to get us further down the pathway. It's not just looking for the white support. And my other comment was that the Old Boys Network sometimes are white women.
Yep.
The Old Boys Network sometimes are white women.
Yeah, we haven't
increasingly so.
We need to put that out, Dr. Colepower. We need to put that out for Donna. That is a panel. I would love to discuss that panel.
Yeah, because
100%.
when a lot of in the board levels, when they're talking about diversity, a lot of people are saying women. So we're looking at men. Sure, we still need to, of course, but women too.
Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
and increasingly it's women of color that are not black.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. That is a whole other panel.
Yeah, Donna's gonna get us on again because that I need to.
That's a whole other panel
every day. Yeah. 100%.
I saw the wave, Nancy. Thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, we're getting close to the end of our time together. And I wonder if there is one thing that you want to leave with the audience. And I'm asking for you to be succinct and brief as we move into our closure for the day.
One thing, and it's a two-parter. If you're getting a newly created position in an organization, ask 2 questions. What is your budget? And what resources will you have to carry out the work? Resources like people and other things. Thank you. My 2 questions.
Okay, lovely. Yeah. Next person.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I want to say that even though it is International Women's Month, this month in March in Canada, October is also Women's History Month. It was declared in September of, I think it was 2016, but it was because of, in October 18th in 1929, the Persons case concluded that ruling that Canadian women were persons in society. Go figure. So if I want to leave a little bit of history, that's what I will say. And I will say, everybody, live your life on purpose. I am succinct, Nancy, succinct and to the point.
I thank you so very much. Did I lose Maxine? Okay.
Oh, she's there.
Okay, there you are, Maxine.
Yeah, I don't know, I got kicked out. So anyway, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. Okay, what I want to leave with everyone as a, I guess, upper middle management employee with an organization that has, various challenges with diversity, inclusion, promotion of Black women and also men throughout the organization. I would say that your biggest tool is to learn resilience. I I I found, because you're going to have like microaggressions, you're going to have feedback that tells you that you're not good enough, you're going to have all kinds of challenges, and then you're also going to have people that are really advocates and allies. So resilience is your key, is to, you have to stand firm, you have to stay strong, you have to stay professional. I know they talk about the angry Black woman. I know we haven't talked about it here. That's a whole other discussion. But I do want us to understand that, as Dr. Power said, people are being asked to share power, right? And this is the challenge that you will have. When people are asked to share power, there's going to be microaggressions. There's going to be, looking at you like you are not enough. And I want you to remember that you are all enough. You are enough. You have what it takes to be successful in the organization. You're going to have days where you feel like, why am I not enough? Why can't I be successful? Why? But you have to remember you are enough. You are working in an organization that, as Tianda said, built by white men for white men. So you have to learn how to navigate that and know that you are enough, and just be resilient, patience, and confidence. That's what I would say. I'm not saying it's nice, it's not fair, but it is the reality. So just make sure that you find a way to be resilient, whatever tactics you need to do that, and be patient. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all. Wow, that was more than enough. And thank you for reminding us, Maxine, that we are enough. Indeed, these three powerful and brilliant women poured into us with care and compassion. I'm leaving with a whole bag of information, and a few things resonate with me. I really love the idea that we should probably all have stickers all over that says we are enough, and that we should be repeating that probably daily. I'm also reminded that we have to somehow interject ourselves at the senior board level. And as someone who does equity frameworks, I can tell you, we're not going to be successful unless we're there. It's for naught. I'm sorry. That's just the bottom line. The CEO, the president's performance must be linked, and they must be held accountable. I am reminded of misogyny, and that is strictly the hatred of Black women. That's not new. When I started out, I said any conversation about the employees of Black people, Black women, must be rooted in anti-Black racism. And that's a particular type of racism that morphs over time and is manifested in numerous ways.
Yeah.
The whole idea of being resilient, I am a bit challenged by, because I think that organizations need to be held accountable for their impact on us as Black women. And so I'd like to push us a little further and just remind us that we must practice good self-care. And one of our sisters who wasn't able to make it today, one of the words that she left with me was that we must remember to work smarter, not harder. Without much ado, thank you, Tianda Kerr. Thank you, Maxine Schroeder. Thank you, Caroline Cole Power. Deep appreciation to the audience for joining and communing with us today. Thank you, Donna, for all you do and more. Malcolm Edwards, thank you for your tech support. Again, it was an absolute privilege to be with you this afternoon. Ubuntu.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine,